everyone to today's webinar, From Brownfield to Bright Future, Telling Your Brownfield Success Story. Today we're going to be talking about every aspect of successes, from how you define it to how you share your story. So my name is Lauren Gazakanian. I am the communications manager for the Center for Creative Land Recycling. I have more than 20 years of experience in helping organizations tell their stories as a professional marketer and public relations professional. With me today is Elise Moeller, who is a Brownfield redevelopment specialist from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and Mayor Mila Besic from the town of Superior, Arizona. So today we're going to be going over a lot of content related to how to, why you should tell your success story, who you should tell your success stories to, and sort of what they are interested in learning about. We're going to discuss different avenues for success stories, and then also storytelling methods for how to actually structure your story. We'll help you identify people in your community and in your organization who can help you with your storytelling. And then finally, Mayor Mila is going to share how Superior, Arizona has leveraged storytelling to increase funding and buy-in for the town's Brownfield program. So first, a little bit of background for the Center for Creative Land Recycling. We are a national nonprofit that promotes the sustainable, equitable, and responsible reuse of underutilized and environmentally impacted properties, aka brownfields. We are the US EPA technical assistance provider for regions 9 and 10, which is the West Coast, as well as the technical assistance provider for California Department of Toxic Substances Brownfield program. We help brownfield practitioners at every step in the brownfield process, from getting you started to getting the job done. And within all of this is storytelling. That is something that we can help communities with, is packaging your story and getting it to the people who need to hear it. So let's start at the top. Why? Why should you tell your success stories? I'm going to go to the old philosophical question: if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, did it make a sound? If you have a success and you don't tell anyone about it, did it really happen? By sharing your success story, you can increase your buy-in and support. You can increase the chances that you're going to get funding in the future. You can find your supporters and also your partners through telling your success story. But you can also tell the story of your community. You can uplift the voices within your community and really advocate for the neighborhoods that you do work in. And in general, you can support brownfield funding overall in other communities by sharing how your brownfield program is having successes. So how do we define a success? As we know, brownfield reuse projects can take a really long time. Sometimes they take decades from start to finish. And you don't just want to talk about when you get started and when you finish, because people are going to forget that you're there doing this work. And they're not going to realize that you're maintaining momentum and that you're actually moving forward with projects. So the good way to stay top of mind is to celebrate your small successes, your interim successes, your progress made towards a goal, as well as your milestones, which are those significant events, like when you complete your cleanup or you start your vertical construction. In addition to this big list of different successes that you can promote, you can find unique successes within your brownfield project. And to tell that story, I'm going to use this little bird, which is the least bell vireo. This is an endangered species that is native to California, and it likes riparian habitat. It likes to be around water. And there's not a lot of water left in Los Angeles, and due to habitat loss, this little bird has become endangered. So that brings us to Taylor Yard. This large plot of land is about an 80-acre brownfield right on the banks of the Los Angeles River, in a neighborhood called Frogtown in LA. Because this project is so big, one way to keep momentum and continue to have successes to talk about is to break these larger sites into parcels. So a number of these parcels, the portions that didn't have as much contamination, have been successfully redeveloped, including one parcel, parcel G1, which has been turned into the Rio de Los Angeles State Park. Another parcel I want you to look at is parcel G2. this is where the majority of the contamination is on this site. And so this parcel is still in the assessment phase. So here are two different success stories coming from Taylor Yards. The first one is from Rio de Los Angeles State Park, which was completed back in 2007. So this is a completed brownfield project. And as the habitat has been restored, this little bird, the least Belvario, has made its comeback. And so this is a not very typical brownfield success story, but as you can see, it made it to the top of the Los Angeles Times California section because it was so exciting that this bird came back. On the G2 parcel, this heavily contaminated parcel, there's some really exciting bioremediation pilot studies happening on this parcel where they are taking, or Professor Daniel Stevenson's here is taking native plants and fungi and is using it to suck up the petroleum from the soil. So while the assessment and cleanup is still happening on this site, having this pilot study was seen as a success. And as you can see, the Guardian agreed. And the work happening on the site received international attention because it was unique. So look for the unique aspects of your story and define success in ways that make sense to you. It doesn't have to be a ribbon cutting. It doesn't have to be a groundbreaking. It can be things like the return of wildlife or the success of a pilot study. So when we tell our success stories, it's important to know that you have different audiences you want to engage and that those audiences have different motivations. So your grant issuing agency, they're going to be interested in different things than community members or financiers. So I have this chart here. You can kind of draw these lines mentally to where you think your different audiences are going to be interested in. And there is going to be overlap. There are audiences that are going to be interested in a variety of motivations. So breaking it down by audience, we're going to start at the top with your grant issuing agency. You definitely want to share your successes with the people who are giving you money, with the agencies that are giving you money, because they want to see that this funding is being well spent. They like tangible results. They like stats and numbers and quotes and photos. Your grant issuing agency wants to be invited to your groundbreaking and ribbon cutting so that they can celebrate with you. And in addition to involving your grant issuing agency, also include the technical assistance providers that may have assisted you along the way. We want to celebrate with you as well. And as I mentioned before, we can help you tell this success story. I guarantee you, if you invite us to a ribbon cutting and we go, we will share it on our social media. So definitely involve your technical assistance providers as well. I have a note on this slide for those of you who are EPA grantees. A really easy way to share your successes with EPA is to input it into acres. EPA uses the data in acres to showcase the success of the Brownfield program to Congress and the public, which helps keep the program going, which helps more appropriations. So it's definitely something everyone should do. And I have a link in this. And by the way, these slides will be available after the webinar. And this link will take you to some training for how to input this information into acres. And this link is also in the chat. Thank you, Devin. For elected officials, really think about the solutions that they campaigned on and their general legacy. Elected officials want to leave places better than they found them. So focusing on, again, those tangible numbers around jobs and tax revenue. Tax revenue is definitely important for elected officials. That's going to be important, and make sure to involve them in your brownfield projects. Here I have a picture of Oakland Mayor Barbara Lee helping to cut the ribbon at a new affordable housing project on a brownfield. So, elected officials want to take part in your successes because they want to share your successes. This photo here from the Community Housing Development Corporation, they are a California brownfield grantee. This picture is of elected officials from the mayor of Richmond to county supervisors, assembly members, state senators, representatives from grant issuing agencies, and partners. Everyone wanted in on the action. Everyone wanted to come to this celebration. And even though they had to move inside because of rain and no dirt was actually moved, they came, they were excited for the progress being made on this site. They took their pictures and then they shared this with their constituents, with their stakeholders, celebrating the successes that this nonprofit developer was having. For residents want something to love. They want to see how you are benefiting their community. So talking about successes around cleanup, about creating sense of place, about improving quality of life. Um, with residents, it's a really good opportunity to share renderings of what's coming. And obviously you need to include residents in deciding what that end use is. But once that's been done, sharing those renderings, sharing what you all decided together, is a really good way to get more people on board. And just creating those renderings is a success worth celebrating. So here we see, what's possible. A shuttered paint factory in Emeryville, California, a very large brownfield, was transformed into multiple end uses, including this beautiful park and some housing. So showcasing how the community can be benefited by your project, and also showcasing how you've benefited other areas, other work that you've done will help residents get on board and get excited about what you're doing in their neighborhood. And then we have property owners. There's definitely some overlap here between residents and property owners, but not all residents are property owners. We know that many residents are renters. And then also not all property owners live locally. So there's, I would consider this a Venn diagram here. Property owners, they want to make sure that their investment's going to be protected, that their property value is and resale potential is going to be improved because of the work that you are doing. Also, it's important to communicate with property owners and show the benefits of brownfield reuse, because there may be some wariness about what's happening around their properties. They may be concerned that brownfield reuse is going to lead to enforcement action. So educating them on the brownfield process will help bring them on board and turn property owners not just into project supporters, but people who are shouting from the rooftops the good things you are doing. The photo here is of a brownfield tour in the town of Wilcox, Arizona, which used assessment grants on their historic Main Street to clean up lead, and also with other grants cleaned up lead and asbestos from these old buildings. And that was a benefit for these property owners. And now they're excited to share this success with others and open their doors up to other land use professionals. And at this workshop, we had a local journalist as well who shared their successes, as a result of the Brownfield program. And then last but certainly not least are investors. So these are the people who are going to be helping you get vertical on your brownfield reuse and actually get to your end use. For investors, they really have a fear of FOMO, of missing out. They want to get in early. They want to invest in areas that are coming up, that are seeing these improvements. They're going to invest in neighborhood potential, in the story of what this neighborhood is going to be. And having past successes illustrated is really going to help bring investors on board, because they don't want to get involved in something if they don't know it's going to be successful. So my example here is from Niagara County, New York. This county in upstate New York has about 600 brownfields that they're looking to redevelop. And they've utilized a story map on their website to help get these sites and the redevelopment moving forward. And what they do is they start with their success stories. They start with what has been done on brownfields, what the possibilities are. And then after investors see what's possible, they see the sites that are available for redevelopment so that they can help continue the momentum and the successes that are happening in Niagara County. So in addition to having a number of different audiences and a number of different messages, there's also a number of different avenues to share your success story. And I have that broken up into 3 different categories here. So the first bucket is owned media. So this you can think of is stuff that you manage, your website, your newsletter, any collateral that you print. You are the one you have full creative control over owned media. But this also means that it's up to you to promote. Earned media, this is content created by journalists. This is articles, blog posts. You have less control, but let me just say as a caveat to that, with the reduced budgets and staff of a lot of media, they are leaning more on the people telling them the stories to actually help write the stories. In some cases, they will ask you to write the entire article. So in some cases, earned media and owned media has a big overlap. This is also historically has been considered the most credible. I put quotes around credible because we all know that mistrust in media is a big problem right now. So don't just get your story out there in in the newspaper and think that you're done telling your success story. You're not. You're going to want to continue to tell this story in other ways in order to uh, through um, get through to people who may not trust what they read in the newspaper. And last, and I would certainly say least, is paid media. So this again is content you create, you have full creative control, but you're going to pay for it. These are advertisements, advertorials, promotional videos. You have the largest potential audience here, but also there is a cost. So I highly recommend that you only go this route in very specific instances. And I am saying that again as someone who comes from an advertising background. So breaking this down a little bit further, for owned media, you can really focus on a lot of different stories here because really you can post and share as much as you want. It's really just a factor of how much time you have to dedicate to success stories. So, this is where you can really, share those milestones, those opportunities for people to come out and celebrate with you. And you can tell smaller stories here, focusing on specific benefits, showcasing what your project's going to do. I also highly recommend you leverage partners for promotion. Tag people in your post, share your posts, encourage people to reshare. Again, this is another reason why it's so good to invite people to your events because they will then share your successes. In addition to the places that you probably think of as being owned media like your website, I want you to also remember personal outreach. So these are invitations and calls to action that you send directly to people via email or phone calls. That's a great way of telling your story is just one-on-one. And I also highly want to recommend video. It's a really good way to tell a complete success story with visuals, with quotes, in order to get your message to who you need to see it. My example here is from the city of Troutdale, Oregon. They have a large brownfield that's been cleaned up, and they're currently in the process of finding the redevelopment partners. So they created a video that showcased what this site could be to help get investors and developers on board. Earned media, focus really on fact-oriented content here for the most part. Ribbon cuttings, number of jobs created, announcements around partnerships, grants being awarded. But in addition to those more fact-based story ideas, there's also feature style articles that you can pursue around problem solved or opportunities created. My two examples from Taylor Yard are feature style stories around unique successes. So there's four typical ways to communicate with the media. The first is a media alert. This is your sort of who, what, where, when, why. This is how you invite media to events. You let them know what's happening and where they need to go. A press release, this is going to be longer format. It has quotes in it. It's a really good way to get into, announcing funding or partnerships or milestones. And by giving them those quotes, the journalist can take that press release and create a story out of it. As a caveat here, oftentimes, again, because of the reduced budgets, a journalist will literally take your press release and turn it into a story. So do keep that in mind when writing a press release. A pitched is a personal story that you share with select journalists. So if I was working with Taylor Yards, this is the avenue I would go for the story about the endangered species or the mycorrhiza remediation case studies. I would select a small group of environmental writers and I would send them a specific pitch about that success story. And then last but not least, because a lot of ways this is your most tried and true method for getting into print, is letters to the editors or op-eds. So this is a great way to draw attention to something that you are doing within the community. Also a great opportunity for any sort of call to action and alerting the community to things that they should be aware of, whether it be a comment period opening up or uh, you know, a request for people to help decide what the future of a site will be. And then I didn't even create one for paid media because, again, I really want this to be your last resource, your last avenue for sharing your success story. Um, Trying to figure out how to amplify your story can be confusing. You know, when is it something that you need to share on your platform versus something that you need to contact the media about? And I really see this as a hierarchy, as a pyramid. You know, at the bottom we have your own platforms. You know, your owned content, sharing it, sharing your content with your audience. A step up from that is contacting the media. A step up from that is hosting events. So this is, you know, obviously a great way to celebrate your successes, but definitely more work than simply writing a media alert. And then at the very top of our hierarchy of our pyramid, we have buy advertising. So this is a good option if you need to attract investors or get your marketing materials in front of the people who you need to help get you to your end use. Otherwise, I highly recommend you use owned and earned media to amplify your story. And with that, we're going to go to Elise, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about how to actually structure your success story.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I really liked what you said about how successes aren't always measured the same. They can really be subjective. And I think that that's a huge theme to carry into storytelling and also grant writing. If anyone is thinking of applying to any EPA Brownfield grants, any upcoming grants at all, storytelling is such a huge part of that. And we'll kind of go through that too. I did also realize I'm wearing the exact same shirt in my headshot. I think it just makes my eyes pop. No, I'm kidding. But hi, everyone. My name is Elise Moeller. I am with NJIT Tab. We are the tab providers for regions 2 and 4. And I'm going to give some tips and tricks of telling your brownfield story. Next slide. So according to the wife of the very well-loved Mr. Rogers, he had kept a quote from a peace activist and nun, Sister Mary Lou Kaunaki, in his wallet that read, "There isn't anyone that you couldn't love once you've heard their story." So I ask you, can this work for places, sites, and buildings as well? Next slide, please. So everyone loves a good story, but what really draws us in? So the first thing is really knowing your audience and catering to their likes. Lauren went through that very well. Another thing is if you love your stories, if you love what you're saying and telling and sharing with people, you're going to convey more emotion and better appeal to your audience. And while there are many technical aspects of the brownfield redevelopment process, I know there's a bunch of hoops to jump through. Telling your story with emotion and passion, it's something that's going to help you show yourself, your organization as relatable and real. The characters of your story are just as important as the brownfield itself. Who's being affected, who are the heroes, and what obstacles must they overcome? Next slide, please. So here's the traditional 3-act narrative structure that divides a story into 3 parts or acts. I think we all kind of learned this a little bit in middle school or high school, maybe. And it's usually the acts are referred to as setup, confrontation, and resolution. And this model was popularized by American author and speaker Sid Field. So when making this presentation, I kind of want to go through an example with a highly popular film that maybe some or most people in this room have seen. Next slide. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, of course. So we're going to be discussing the 1971 musical film that stars Gene Wilder, not the 2005 film with Johnny Depp, or the 2023 film with Timothée Chalamet. So we have our introduction. The story identifies Charlie Bucket. He lives in poverty with his family, Grandpa Joe as well. And Grandpa Joe was a former employee of the Wonka factory. He explains to Charlie that the gates of the factory closed many, many years ago to prevent sabotage from spies. And following years of privacy, Wonka suddenly announced that 5 golden tickets were hidden in chocolate Wonka bars. And the finders of these tickets were going to receive a factory tour and, best part, a lifetime supply of chocolate. Kind of like a child's version of scratch-off tickets. Click, please. As for the rising action, 4 tickets are found by Augustus Gloop, Veruca Salt, Violet Beauregard, and Mike TV. The final tickets found by Charlie, who chooses his Grandpa Joe to come as a chaperone. And all the ticket winners arrive at the factory. They're greeted by Wonka himself. Click, please. The crisis of the story now is, we kind of know, each child's character flaws cause them to give into temptation and act quote unquote naughty, resulting in their quite unusual elimination. Our falling action is that, following the downfall of the other children, Wonka announces that Charlie has passed the morality test and gifts his factory to Charlie and his family upon Wonka's retirement. I know we skipped quite a few details in this story, like the chocolate-covered Augustus being sucked up a pipe that might not really fit through, Veruca's demand that her father buys her a magic goose, every young girl's dream, or Violet swelling up into a giant blueberry. If you've never seen the film, I'm sure that this sounds like a fever dream to you, which it kind of was as a child, but overall the story details I've mentioned are really the key plot points. Next slide. So the traditional 3-act narrative structure is typically how people will tell their stories, or if you're like me, you have 50 different points and 100 different details that are never critical to getting to the point of the story. This structure is common in Western literature and film, but it's missing data, it's missing emotion, empowerment, challenges, and also a further deep dive into the characters. So we have Pauline Clegg, a Yeagle woman from the north coast of New South Wales, an Australian state. And she's recognized and vocalized that Indigenous storytelling has different rules, especially in film. The 5B Indigenous storytelling includes a setup, character introduction, rising action, leading to the crisis or climax, and falling action that includes the future of characters in their setting. I also do want to shout out Jennifer from KSU Tab for the introduction and understanding of the 5B Indigenous storytelling. Next slide. So let's use that 5B Indigenous storytelling structure and break down Willy Wonka even more. So we're going back to the land of Oompa Loompas, and we're presented with several questions in our Once Upon a Time. Who's Charlie? Who does he live with? His family is in poverty, with 4 grandparents sharing one bed, and how did that happen? What sort of challenges do the Buckets face in their small home? Who is Willy Wonka, and why did he close up his factory? Click. The introduction comes when Wonka announces that 5 golden tickets were hidden in his Wonka bars. And they're presented, children and adults are presented with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Click. We can really see the rising action of the story when Charlie finds the last golden ticket, and click. The crisis or climax can be viewed as 4 of the 5 children who are eliminated from the factory tour one by one due to their character flaws. The falling action is when Charlie passes the morality test and is the inheritor of Wonka's factory. And click one more time, thank you. The future of the characters following the falling action raises some questions as well, like how does the Bucket family feel about moving into the factory? Is the factory doing well under Charlie and Grandpa Joe's supervision? And are they going to open the factory gates to the public again? Next slide, please. You guys are done hearing me say click. That was just my animations for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now we're going to go into a real life example. So Dr. Ana Baptista grew up in a place called Ironbound that's located in Newark, New Jersey, local to Region 2. The name references the rail lines that are flanking an industrialized landscape that's also a vibrant community of low-income and working-class people of color and immigrants. The neighborhood was created out of marsh that is part of the New Jersey Meadowlands, and although this area once thrived as part of a complex estuary, it was historically seen as treacherous land, filled in with garbage dumps and tamed to accommodate the industry along its waterways. Its steel-girded borders and the toxic Passaic River were both respected and feared. Next slide. So the underbelly infrastructure of the metropolitan area, consisting of prisons, trash incinerators, seaport and airport, and sewage, chemical, and power plants, were all placed on these marginal lands. Dr. Ana Baptista refers to this as sacrifice zones, or areas where residents are subjected to heightened levels of pollution and hazardous materials, despite the adverse impacts on their health. These sacrifice zones coexisted alongside concentrated pockets of low-income communities of color that had experienced decades of industrial pollution, high housing cost burdens, and economic underinvestment. Next slide. Dr. Baptista and the Ironbound Community Corporation conduct toxic tours of Newark for students and other interested individuals or groups. Now, as they guide people through the city, they're not just telling stories of horrors of environmental destruction, but they're also making a call to action for people both within as well as outside the community. In her personal journey working with underserved communities, Dr. Baptista explains that she's found her voice by trying to make sense that her own community make sense of the ways that her own community was affected by underinvestment, lack of resources, industrialization, capitalism, and consumption. Now, with these tours, the narratives of impacted residents can shape action as well as support change. Next slide. When we have a successful brownfield redevelopment project, those brownfield champions should shout it out from the rooftop, because that storytelling can inspire others and show them that these sites aren't just black holes that they should stay away from. These are sites with a history, with characters, rising action, and a climax that we can also be a part of. Storytelling is a vital part of the brownfield redevelopment process, not just for the organization or developers, but also for, as Lauren mentioned, residents, elected officials, property owners, grantors, and so on. We're sharing our success stories to show possibilities for other brownfields, inspire other groups or individuals, and demonstrate the communal impacts. No matter who the intended audience is, people will be listening. Next slide. So here's some federal, state, and local funds available for different steps throughout the brownfield redevelopment process, such as assessment, investigation, planning, engaging the community, cleanup, and so on. On the screen right here are some examples of funding sources, which are the EPA MARC grants. MARC stands for Multi-Purpose Assessment Revolving Loan Fund and Cleanup. And these are actually the awards allotted for FY26 according to the EPA. And the EPA does note that all amounts are subject to change. So just keep updated with the EPA website. And next slide, please. Going back to that whole discussion of grant writing and how it's your choice and your time to tell your story, these grants will have application guidelines, and usually they'll include adding your narrative. We should think of this as the spirit of what the grantor is looking for, and it's very important to share your story here. While there's more information like forms to be included in your grant application, this is their time for storytelling. How is your community different from other applicants? How is your project different? People are listening, and remember, ordinary does not get funded. A good story will make you stand out among the other applicants. Next slide. A good story can also build excitement and draw on passion in the different audiences that we've discussed to assist them in imagining the futures of these sites. So here we see a former landfill located in Astoria, Oregon that was active from 1965 to 1985, and then it sat vacant for several more years. So taking a look at this pretty large brownfield site, can you guys picture this site following redevelopment? What does it look like? Are there people there? What jobs were created with the new development? I don't know if anyone wants to put anything in chat for some ideas. I think it's pretty fun to kind of envision some ideas for quite the large site. You know, it has larger boundaries, but a little fun fact, lots of movies were filmed in Astoria, Oregon, and these include The Goonies, Kindergarten Cop, and Free Willy. Next slide, please. So this story begins in 1978 when the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality required closure of the landfill because of discharge to a nearby creek and wetland. So for over 30 years, the site remained in limbo as final closure and capping of the landfill, which is a method used to prevent human exposure to contaminated soils, was found to be a bit too costly for the city. However, in 2013, a win-win-win solution was conceptualized. Multiple public and private entities came together for the redevelopment of this brownfield to benefit the community. Following the capping and closing of the inactive landfill, the brownfield went through the redevelopment process, and the former landfill was transformed into a brand new sports complex. This was completed in 2014, creating a new revenue source for the Astoria School District while freeing up developable land for a much-needed expansion of the nearby Columbia Memorial Hospital. Go Fighting Fishermen. Next slide, please. Data. So gathering, interpreting, and displaying data is crucial to the brownfield redevelopment process. During processes like community engagement and planning, data is collected about the site, it's collected about community members, and so on. This can include demographics such as average incomes, race, population, average age, as well as local information like the amount of affordable housing in the area, how many brownfield sites are in the community, and why might there be so many, land acreage, and the community's goals and visions for site redevelopment. Now, this data is crucial to writing grants and defining your site, but data is just statistics and numbers, it's pie charts and line graphs until you weave that into a story. By effectively telling our site story, We then create better avenues to access funding, develop relationships with stakeholders and partners, and also make our grant applications stand out. Next slide, please. Have you ever sat through a lecture, a ceremony, maybe a public gathering where the passion and emotion of the speaker really begins to give you the same feelings or spark some kind of emotions within you? Or maybe you've seen a speaker on television connect with their audience through the use of emotions, whether that's excitement, sadness, anger, adoration, or maybe frustration. Emotion is used by speakers and storytellers everywhere to improve public engagement and appeal to a more diverse audience. It's used by all different kinds of storytellers, from presidents and politicians to actors and activists to speakers at the National Brownfields Training Conference last week. So let's take Kioi Kwan, Greta Thunberg, and Martin Luther King Jr. as examples. I'm not going to go into the details of their speeches and their stories, but Kioi Kwan's 2023 Oscar speech, Greta Thunberg's appearance in many interviews and conferences, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech are really great examples of storytellers who tactfully and genuinely displayed heavy emotion in prior speeches as a way of telling a story, their story, reaching diverse audiences and giving people a voice. Emotion in storytelling has the potential to engage underserved communities, break down polarizing barriers, and realign planning projects for inclusive, long-lasting changes. When you tell your story with emotion, with passion, you gain the power to synthesize different voices when identifying common hopes, aspirations, and maybe visions of a place, or in this case, a brownfield. Next slide, please. Let's work through the Sid Fields 3-act narrative using a real-life example of a brownfield. So take a look at this site. The top picture on the right side was captured in April 2012 from Google Maps, and it shows a former industrial building sitting unused on a piece of land in Johnson City, New York. The setup of this story tells about the post-war industrial decline leading to factory closures throughout Johnson City, and these abandoned structures stood as a reminder of hard times for 40 years, with many people losing their jobs. Our rising action is that the sister factories Century and Sunrise are sold to investors. The site is assessed and contamination is identified. The structure remains intact, the site's cleaned up, and the existing structure is repurposed. Our following action, shown in the bottom picture on the right, taken in September 2019, also from Google Maps, shows the Century Sunrise redevelopment, which opened in 2018 and provided affordable housing to residents within Johnson City. Next slide, please. So here's some more before and after pictures of the sister factory buildings that were transformed. And personally, I think it's really nice to hear about the redevelopment of former industrial buildings into community assets like affordable housing. But from the background that I gave in the last slide, we're kind of missing a little bit more, right? The history, the emotion, data, inspiration, vision, and characters. So let's dive a bit deeper. Next slide, please. We're going to break down our brownfield story even more, this time using the 5B Indigenous storytelling method that I discussed before. So once upon a time, there lived the Endicott Johnson Corporation. At one time, Endicott Johnson was the largest producer of footwear in the US, and at its peak, it operated dozens of factories in the Triple Cities area in New York. This is consisting of Binghamton, Johnson City, and Endicott, as well as outside the region. By World War I, it was the world's largest shoe manufacturer, employing more than 30,000 workers. It was the goal of the founders of Endicott Johnson to create housing opportunities for their employees close to where they worked. The company also treated its workers fairly, and the president envisioned a campus with healthcare, jobs, a place for recreation, and a sense of community. Endicott Johnson was a major cultural and economic force in the development of Johnson City and New York. So our introduction to this story begins with the Endicott Johnson factories closed throughout the city due to the post-war industrial decline. The abandoned structures stood as a reminder of hard times for 40 years. From there, the sister factories Century and Sunrise were sold to investors. Again, the site was assessed, contamination was identified, and the structural remains were deemed intact. The site was cleaned up and the existing structure was repurposed, providing the climax of our story. And then in 2018, Century Sunrise redevelopment opened, providing affordable housing options within Johnson City. The developers and owners of this site also envisioned recreating the goals of the Endicott Johnson Corporation and its president. So while bringing these historic buildings that were such a huge part of this community back to their former glory, They also revitalized these buildings with residential and commercial mixed uses, with the hope of adding to the community's vision of creating a vital downtown 24/7 neighborhood right in the heart of Johnson City. The land was cleaned up and given back to helping the working class by providing affordable housing as well as a place for recreation. So really, if we think about it, this project came full circle. The redevelopment attracted new residents and further development within the city. Many former industrial sites since then have been remediated and given new life, providing needs such as affordable housing and public recreation space. And why is that? Because Brownfield champions shouted their story from the rooftops. So in your opinion, which Brownfield story hooked you in more? Was it the one that was told in the 3-act narrative, or maybe the one using a 5-beat narrative structure that incorporated more? Next slide, please. So now that we've unraveled the story of a very real brownfield site that had such a prominent part in Johnson City's history, as well as a full circle redevelopment for greater community use, we've reached the end of my presentation. There's so many aspects and qualities to a good story, and they should be used when we talk about brownfields. So I just want you to keep these main points in mind. Brownfields are vacant or underutilized sites with confirmed or potential contamination. And we tell stories about these sites to articulate our ideas and visions, appeal to different audience members with different interests, support and amplify underinvested voices, and catalyze community involvement. Don't ignore the narrative portion of your grant application. Use it to tell the story of your site and the people in your community. And telling our stories is critical to gaining financial resources and partnerships. We wish to imagine a better future for these sites, and storytelling is a critical aspect of that. Next slide. So what do you think? Can we learn to love a site once we get to know it? Love that picture of Mr. Rogers and love Mr. Rogers. I'm now going to hand it over to Mayor Mila Besic. Thank you.
Well, Lauren and Elise, thank you for your presentation and introduction. My name is Mila Besic. I'm the mayor of Superior, Arizona. I've been the mayor since 2016, and I was the first female elected mayor of Superior. I have to tell you, all the advice that Lauren and Elise have given today, very much in the framework of how we got started from a very bad place to being almost 10 years later in a place that our story is being featured quite regularly. Next slide. Superior is 60 miles east of downtown Phoenix. Arizona is one of the leading copper producers in the United States of America. I was just a young girl in 1982 when the Magma mine closed, and this was the mine that my parents worked for. My grandparents, great-grandparents came in when they immigrated to Superior. In 1982, we all know there was an economic kind of decline in our country. That's when my parents lost their jobs. And they opted to stay in Superior. My grandmothers were here. They were young widows, and they stayed here and commuted to their work. Most of my peers did as well. And we really started to see we were growing up in a time of not that boom town, not that time of nostalgia that my parents and grandparents grew up in. But in 1996, I was getting ready to graduate from high school, and the mine now owned by BHP announced that they were going to turn the pumps on to the mine, and there would never be any more mining again in Superior. That was the expectation. So our guidance counselors are already seeing a decline in student enrollment. You know, students, get out of here. Here's some scholarships. There's probably not going to be much to come home to. Your parents are likely really going to have to leave. My parents continued on commuting to their jobs in government. My mother worked in the medical system for a prison. Both of them commuted about 45 minutes each way every day to their jobs. By the early 2000s, mid 2000s, Superior would be experiencing a vacancy rate higher than Detroit and New Orleans post Katrina. This blight spread across our mining region. We were watching all of our towns turn into a ghost town. It wasn't just Superior. There were about 6 other world-class mines around us, and the industry had basically began to disinvest in the thriving nature of communities. Everything had changed about our economy in general. Next slide. In 2000, in the late 2000s, so let's go back to 2000, well, actually early 2000s, there was an announcement made that Rio Tinto and BHP announced a joint venture to reopen the Magma mine, which is technically the largest untapped copper ore deposit. Resolution Copper would begin 2 decades of permitting and approval, which we're at today. Now, I became the mayor in 2016 because small town politics can sometimes get pretty intense, and my family had been here for 5 generations. My father had ran for office. He was a county manager. My uncle had been the vice mayor after my dad had to resign from being on the council for his career. There was a lot of chaos, and I grew up during a lot of that chaos. But now we had this other adventure coming on board, and that was this Resolution Copper project. In 2013, I ran on a recall and won for a seat on the council. And in 2016, my predecessor as a mayor, he had made some choices that forced a recall against him. But we had no plan in 2016 on how to deal with this very huge mine coming back our way. And we also had no idea the complexities. When I became the mayor in 2016 and sworn in, our community was 6 years behind on their audits. We had zero relationship with Resolution Copper. The Arizona Department of Environmental Quality was absolutely ready to pose daily sanctions on us because of our transfer station violations. And we were $4 million in debt to ourselves over a misuse of highway revenue funds in our community. Most of my family and friends thought I was crazy for wanting to run for office, but we did. I did. And our council had to not only solve all of these challenges and have the right staff in place, we had to rebuild trust within our staff, rebuild trust within our community, but we also didn't want to just be marred with problems. We knew we had opportunity because of this Resolution Copper project. And because of that, we also wanted to have a big, huge, hairy goal. And that started with a retreat, solving problems, communication. When you're telling your story, do you have communication of trust within the leaders of your community? That is incredibly important to building a successful story, is that building trust. So right now, 2016, here we are. We have built so many strong public-private partnerships. Resolution Copper is at the forefront of that. But our next slide, please. To kind of explain a little bit more about our revitalization and the blight, the picture up on top is roughly, I would have to say, around 2000, probably 1998, 1999. So that's literally like right after I graduated from high school. You'll see how bland and shabby. And then the lower picture is actually from probably 2009, 2010-ish. And you'll see the bright colors painted on Main Street. There's still some blight to be seen. There's still some things that haven't changed. And I use this picture because it was the first picture that I got to see, kind of being part of the revitalization, knowing that we will do something that started to show real life in our community. The first time seeing our downtown parking spots really filled up and the bright colors. And this was just at one of our festivals and events. It took the will of just internal people in our community to say, we want to do something different. And so what we did is we just started painting buildings. We got paint donations from other urban communities that were giving away paint. We found all these resources. And so when I tell this story, I tell for those that may be looking for hope and how to do this in their community, don't underestimate the tiniest things you can do, from trash pickups to painting a building. That, led us into just building up hope, and actually did start putting some pressure on community leaders that were maybe kind of stuck in how things used to be or being afraid to make change. Remember, our whole economy had failed us starting in 1982, and that does something to the will of the people in a community. Next slide, please. I'm talking quickly about our multi-generational center. So I mentioned all of our problems, all of our struggles, and all of that did not come easy, but we knew we needed to have something to instill hope. And so our council decided one night, while sitting around at a very just low-key retreat, and I like to stress the low-key and the simpleness because I think that's important for all communities to understand. Sometimes the best ideas come out of just sharing a simple meal, sharing some friendship, sharing camaraderie, and talking about, well, what would be your big, huge, hairy goals. So we had two things out of that retreat. One, a dog park, and number two, we wanted a multi-gen center. And we didn't just want anything. Our town manager was very quick to remind us that small towns often suffer through recessions. So we wanted something that was recession proof. So he said, well, if you want a new library and you want a gym, we're going to have to figure out how to make all of these things happen in one place. Our current town hall is in an old junior high. So this was actually our first big relationship building exercise with the mind to say, will you be our partner? As Mr. Rogers would say, won't you be my neighbor? Won't you be my partner on this? We're going to be in business together for a very long time because of this huge ore deposit. So they kind of kicked off with some very initial funds, stacked funding. We received a earmark from our congressional delegation, which was great, 1.25 million. So we're really trying to building a package, an idea, getting everything together, surveying the community. COVID hits, and that COVID comes back, and inflation's gone up so high, and our $4 million budget, because remember, my council was like, oh, let's go and build a brand new building. Town manager has to bring us back down and say, oops, you have $4 million. You can't move ground for $4 million. So let's scale it back and let's make this work. We're working on the Roosevelt Junior High, where our current town hall is at. We're going to put all of these things together. One place, save on utilities, save on staffing, all of these big savings. And our architect comes back and says, well, I finished the design and it's $18 million. We're like, well, we can't afford $18 million. And so I always credit our town manager's wife. She says, why don't you go and ask the private owner of the Superior High School? Now, talk about previous town politics. Local alumni wanted to save the building. The school district sold it to a private owner, and it has sat behind a chain link fence for a very long time, but was still being well cared for as a church retreat and private 55,000 square foot private residence and retreat center. So next slide. As we go through, our multi-gen was going to have everything in it: the recreational sports gym, basketball, pickleball, fitness gym, modern library, which currently this library will be double the size of our current one, business incubator. One of the things we really wanted to make sure is that we had workforce development and skilled job training in our multi-gen center, because our town manager insisted that we needed to make sure we were going to connect our young people to the economic growth, because that's how we were going to build a thriving community, by making sure our young people had some incentive to stay. So the purchase actually went through in 2022. Lots of challenges, lots of days. The telegraph fire came through our community and almost risked our selling of the building, or our purchase of the building, because the owner, his ranch burnt down, and that's where he was going to move this retreat center. So we had lots of challenges, and I will remember the day we closed 3 days early, right at the end of the year of 2021. And I will breathe the biggest sigh of relief, because you have to go through all of these governmental processes. And we couldn't get our check from Rio Tinto and the mining company until they saw that the government was going to be good on their side of our appropriations. So when I say recession proof, I mention this because if all else fails, we can have our front desk person at the town hall check out library books and basketball courts and whatnot, basketball gyms, and help manage this if we ever have to do a reduction in force. So next slide. We started seeing immediate success. In January of 2004, we actually were able to open our welding center. It had been 22 years since our young people had access to skilled job training within their school curriculum without having to travel out of town. And so this is our ribbon cutting day one, and I will share some of the best advice I ever learned as mayor is you celebrate everything. Celebrate that ribbon cutting, celebrate that groundbreaking, make a big deal out of everything, because number one, it builds trust within your community that they see what you're actually accomplishing, what you're doing, and bringing these together. And we started off buying 4 welding bays that day. We had a full class, one full class, and now almost 2 years later, we are running 4 classes every semester, completely full. And there's now even more welding bays because our story, people believed our story that we were actually going to do it. And our local community college actually went in and started writing grants to say, well, we need more welding equipment in our district. So this is how that happened. And again, one tiny celebration amongst all the big celebrations that we're planning for 2026. So again, that's kind of how our story has rolled out with welding. Next slide. Just a little bit more on our welding, just some pictures. We found a fabulous instructor who has worked many construction jobs, and he runs it like a work site. So they're actually working on other projects throughout our community and at the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, making creative stanchions for crowd control and things like that. We're involving this class right back into our community to solve other problems or challenges that we have along the way. Next slide. The other exciting part of our multi-gen center, again, which is opening before the whole center is open, was our hive. And that is operated by the Institute for Digital Inclusion and Acceleration, IDIA. It's an Arizona-based nonprofit that's actually starting to work internationally to bring in high-tech computer labs. So again, we wanted entrepreneurial development. We wanted workforce development. We didn't exactly know how we were going to get there specifically, but we found partners. And it turns out that a leadership program that I went to in 2019, the CEO of IDIA is a Flynn Fellow, and she wanted to expand into rural Arizona. We were her first rural hive. So guess what? We've all learned a lot of things that we didn't anticipate, but we're working together and communicating to build out our story. And this is, again, another ribbon cutting celebrating a portion of the multi-gen being opened. Next slide. So I'm going to share, you can look at these pictures here. We've got virtual reality, robotics. Visitors from our senior center are here learning how to use the robot, the little Rolly robots. We have telemedicine room. We have a podcast room, better than we could have expected in many ways because of just holding firm to a plan, a decision, and communicating regularly with all of our partners. Anybody who will listen, we talk about this story. And as I share this story, this is obviously it's hard to talk about all of it at one time because it's been such a transformational change. Having your elevator pitch available. If you're meeting with your congressional delegation or you're meeting with your state legislature, can you talk about what you most need in less than 10 minutes or an elevator right away? You never know when you're going to get the opportunity to tell your story. Our story really intertwines with having a community that needs to be ready for what is going to be America's largest copper mine and a community that had been disinvested in for 20 years. And I did just get back from the Brownfields conference, and I learned an incredible amount from some of our other extraction-based communities across the nation and how different things are in Arizona. Now, as we've told our story, and I know Lauren and Elise both talked about, earned media and specific media, we're also the home of the Boyce Thompson Arboretum. And we knew that we wanted to have a diversified economy for Superior, not one just reliant on mining. We've been there, we've done that. So we've been working on our tourism, downtown redevelopment, connecting people to visit the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, which now has 150,000 visitors a year. How do we do that? And we continue to work on developing a good brand and a good logo for Superior. Building up partnerships. We have multiple nonprofit partners that help us fund our tourism marketing, from the town of Superior to Rebuild Superior, our Chamber of Commerce, the Arboretum. We're connecting in even after all of our COVID money's been gone, because we use a lot of COVID money to build up our brand and move all of that forward. Now we're all contributing because we want to see that, and that has earned us being one of the 14 best small towns to visit in 2024 from Smithsonian Magazine. But all of our success has come from maintaining and building really great relationships. Next slide. And when I talk about good relationships, we were able to go after a Region 9 EPA grant for phase 1 assessments. It wasn't just Superior who needed this. And at first, Superior, we were like, okay, we need this all for ourselves. And EPA came back and said, well, you're really kind of too small. Maybe do a regional grant. So we gathered our team, we gathered our group, we went outside of our own community that was, kind of building its own collaboration. And I also have the role of being the executive director of our Economic Development Coalition, which is very tiny out here in the Copper Corridor. And we said, well, let's go after this grant regionally. Most of us here have new friends, are all interconnected, But when I was elected in 2016, we also had several new mayors and a county supervisor that was elected. And we were tired of the narrative of why can't we clean up these vacant buildings? Why can't we get rid of the abandonment in our communities? Why can't we, what's going on? And so we started researching state tax policy. We learned that Arizona has a tax loophole that incentivizes blight. We have yet to convince our legislature to change that, but we work on it regularly. Because of the Resolution Copper environmental impact statement, we learned that communities next to the extraction industry in Arizona are also underfunded compared to the impact the industry creates on our community. Now, while that could totally leave us devastated and just kind of like kicked to the curb, we've decided no, we're going to keep working on all of these things together. But the phase one grants have really helped us to make a true impact, not just for Superior, but our entire region. The city of Globe has a workforce center that they're working on. The town of Winkleman's working on a community center. The town of Kearney's had to go in and do all of these different assessments so that way they could reopen old facilities that were damaged. It takes the power of people coming together, honest communication, and being able to tell that story. And I get to honestly say, I'm the spokesperson for all of the good work of all of these people, the spokesperson for the work of our ADQ people, Travis, from Atlas to See Clear, that they're hearing our story and I get to share that. And being able to tell your story is important all the way around. And next slide. And my motto is together we are superior. It takes all of us working together. And one little thing I forgot is, one of the things our community did is we started a clean and lean program. And we started off, and remember, we were $4 million in debt to ourselves. We had very little hope. We had some resilience, but we had to start proving to not only to ourselves, but to others. We started a $10,000 clean and lean program going after these really abandoned zombies properties. Our town manager tells us, you're going to have the political will to stand up to do code enforcement. So it does take leadership. It takes gathering your community and being able to communicate. But that first $10,000 project was a wish and a dream just to make sure that we could put, plexiglass windows to show that we cared about what was happening in our community. And that role right there and talking about our problems has led us to much bigger success, that we're able to sit on a stage and share our story with more people. And it brings us plenty of recognition, and it's helped us, stack in other funding for our project. And so it's my pleasure to share with you all, and I hope you can all come and visit us someday. And one day I'll get better at doing slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mila. That was great. And your last example there about how, showing success with that $10,000 investment can bring the community on board and get people excited about it and build that momentum forward into this big multi-gen center that is well on its way. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions now. Yes, and Mimi does point out that your slides are pretty great. So please go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A. You can ask questions for any one of us. I'll go ahead and I'll get started. I have a question for Elise, because you did mention the importance of storytelling when it comes to grant writing. We do have the next MARC application coming up. So how important is it for people to tell their story when they're applying for a grant?
There's 4 sections when applying for a grant, and the first 2, well, the last 2 are more pro forma, so kind of focusing on forms. The first 2 are where you're telling your story, you're talking about your community, and you're trying to make a case of why your community stands out from others. So I would say it's extremely important to tell your story, to kind of gather all that information, all that data, all that emotion, all the things that we kind of touched on throughout that Mayor Mila also discussed in her examples of, sharing success stories and including that when, creating your grant application, when reviewing it and things like that. And I also do kind of want to shout out for the tab providers. If anyone here is writing a grant application, your tab providers can also review your grant applications at no cost to you. If anyone, wants another set of eyes or hey, what else can we add in here? What should we get rid of? So very, very important to the grant writing applications.
That's great. We have a question for Mayor Bessett. She wants to know what aspects, this is from Mimi. She wants to know what aspects of Superior's story were you most surprised that state and federal regulators were interested in?
I think people got a little bit more interested in our blight story very quickly, because what I didn't mention is that there was the uninvestor who came in to buy properties and then let them fall into disrepair. When you tell that story to a legislator, and even though they're not necessarily, don't lean towards supporting municipalities, they couldn't quite understand how this was actually a state law that incentivized people to not take care of their properties. Um, People, when you talk to the mining industry about the fact that they are a billion, and in this case of tariffs right now, $1 trillion industry, and the money that comes back to the communities of impact is so small, it's made the industry, at least for us, Resolution Copper and Rio Tinto, look at like, oh wow, wait a minute. Um, this is it's going to cost, our project is going to create more people coming here. We need to be ready with housing. We do not build, these communities never have built up a nest egg, especially after 20 years of disinvestment. So we've learned a lot, and I think people are shocked when we tell other developers this. Their like jaws just drop onto the floor. Like, what do you mean? We assume that this industry's creating, and it does, but that old model of how it was when my grandparents existed, that's not the way it is anymore. So that we're having to change the narrative around that, and that's been kind of shocking. And I didn't expect to know so much about mining when I first became the mayor. I just wanted to kind of work on cleaning things up.
And one thing I love about what you did, Mayor Mila, is you rebranded Superior from a mining town to a town with a mine. You gave people other reasons to come and invest in Superior. Okay, so we have an interesting question here. Please discuss the circumstances where you would not want attention or press coverage, or would rather keep the development off the radar. Sometimes it's premature to talk about a partner's investment, and you don't want to scare them off. That's very true. You definitely want to be ready when you go forward. You want to have buy-in from all of the stakeholders and partners when you go to the media. You want to know which one of your partners is going to be prepared to talk to the media for you, what they're willing to share, who, what they're willing to say. You definitely don't want to jump the gun and then call someone up and say, hey, I have this journalist interested in the story, and they aren't interested in the story. So having that communication is really important. As for things that you want to keep off the radar, yeah, stuff goes wrong. There are things that happen. There is such thing as bad press. There's an old PR saying that all press is good press. And we've seen that is not always true. But there are certainly ways to turn bad stories into positives. So, I would say that if there is a problem that happens at your site, really being proactive about it and being the one to tell the story can actually be helpful, because you are the one who is owning that story. So while you may want to be like, we're going to keep this quiet and not focus on it, it may actually be the best thing to lead with that story and say, here is the issue and here is how we're solving it. Or after that story gets out, if you do happen to have something negative that happens on your site or as a part of your redevelopment, by coming through afterwards and focusing on some of the positives of the project, you can really diminish the attention that negative story is getting. So, do definitely always look for the positives. And if that positive is simply, we are aware of this challenge and we are addressing it, that's good to talk about as well. Okay, another question for Mayor Mila. After telling your story, do you feel like you've been able to connect with other communities with similar obstacles or resources?
Definitely. I feel that when we tell our story, especially to other communities who have maybe been used to how the industry, especially the extraction industry operates, there's more desire to be collaborative. Like, how can we do this better? How can we work together? We really realize across rural Arizona, blight has become quite systemic. for many, many reasons, not just for mining. But this law just incentivizes this. And the gentleman who purchased this property, he was an ASU professor. He was a doctoral professor. He taught this real estate strategy of, letting everything become decrepit and then waiting for that boom to happen so you can try to sell, or you create these other agreements. Seen plenty of people get scammed over this, and still legal because we believe in private property rights in Arizona, which isn't a bad thing. But we've seen people join in the coalition, or at least wanting more information for sure.
I also want to add that brownfield redevelopment and these transformations in communities are never a one person or one man job. And we actually have an attendee in chat who's been saying that, Mayor, your story is very, very similar to what they're experiencing in their town and in their community. And I think that's another power of sharing your story and storytelling, is that you connect with other individuals who might need resources or understand how someone moved forward in an obstacle that they might not have yet overcome. So it's not a one-man job, and storytelling really helps kind of break down some of those barriers as well.
Well, and I'm happy to share my story. Send me an email, or I think our contact information was on the first slide, wasn't it? That Lauren put it. I'm always happy to talk with different people. I oftentimes talk to people in small towns, rural places, that they're considering running for office. They're considering, wanting to get involved, because I think right now we see an opportunity where serving at that local level is where you can affect real change that affects people's lives. And I think that's what I look back at. We learned a lot about the NEPA process, because this environmental impact statement for this mine has been one of the largest and most complex. So you can talk a lot about that, and how sometimes those policies actually are not designed to support people and communities as much as they are just designed to support public lands, which belong to all of us. So, very interesting nuances and how to negotiate around that. And again, being able to tell that story. If Lauren had told me you have 5 minutes to tell this story, or 3 minutes, I'd say my community needs money. We've been disinvested for 20 plus years. I have an economic development project coming on, and I need money and support. Help me find the resources.
Yes, and I want to share, I actually met Mayor Mila because of her success story. As the technical assistance provider in Region 9, we are working with Region 9 to develop success story videos. And so I asked my colleagues at CCLR, what is a good community that has a story worth sharing? And my coworker, Elizabeth, who lives in Arizona, said, you really got to talk to Mayor Bessich from Superior. So I called her up and we chatted about the Multi-Gen Center. And that led to us bringing on a local film content producer, and me going out to Arizona and actually, interviewing Mayor Bessich, interviewing the town manager, and creating a video success story of what the town is doing, both with their blight removal and with the Multi-Gen Center. And not to toot my own horn, but as a result of that video, someone saw that video, and Mayor Mila was on the Mayor's Roundtable at last week's National Brownfield Conference, because someone saw that success story. So going out there and telling your story, leveraging your partners and your resources, there's people out there who will help you tell your story. And it may open up new avenues in terms of partners, in terms of funding. Mayor Mila talking to the leader of the Hive brought the Hive to Superior, and it's now the most successful Hive in all of Arizona. So that was a result of, yes, relationship building, but then also telling Superior's story. Let me see if I have any more questions. Okay, this is a question for me. As a part of the TAB provider team for Superior, what aspects of Mayor Bessich efforts and Superior story do you think were most suited to the TAB program support? Are there any future collaborative plans? I will say we really did, we provided assistance with grant preparation for their EPA coalition grant. I need to do a shout out to Arizona ADQ, because they have received a lot of state funding as well. We're really there as a partner for the town of Superior in terms of getting this multi-gen center across the finish line. If they need any assistance when it comes to capital stack, when it comes to questions around any part of the redevelopment process, I will note that they are past the brownfield remediation stage now. So we're really more just cheerleading and trying to help them get across the finish line. All right, do we have any other questions or anything else that our speakers would like to add?
I'm just going to add one more thing, Lauren. We're all in this story together, and I think we're all seeing the cost of inflation. Our government grant funding does not go as far, so don't be afraid to pivot. We thought, oh, we have this big, huge government appropriations that's going to cover everything we need to do. And we're kind of back in this, again, finding those little pots of money, working with our nonprofit partners. So our next planned phase to get done for this year will be our community kitchen that, will hopefully help build out food entrepreneurs and provide that kitchen space. So don't be afraid to say we're having to readjust the plan. This isn't going to all open all at one time. We are setting a pretty hard goal to have a grand opening of the multi-gen center next year on the first Thursday in October 2026, because the building will be turning 100 years old. Now, our staff is working very hard. Will everything be done? We're hoping so. And in that communication strategy, for anybody who's here on that municipal side or small town side, don't be afraid to tell your story. Go to your Chamber of Commerce meetings. We do a big state of the town every year, and everybody comes. Not only do we make it a fun party, but it's our time to tell everybody what we accomplished this year. We do it, in October. So thank you all, and I'm always happy to share our story or, give advice when needed.
Wonderful. Everyone should look for that success story coming out next year for the grand opening of Superior's Multi-Gen Center. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. If we don't have any more questions, I think we can go ahead and bring the webinar to an end. I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and we'll be sending out the slides and a webinar recording to everyone via email in the next week or so. So thank you very much.
Thank you.